The cold metal handcuffs tightened painfully and humiliatingly around Isabella Hernandez's wrists. She stood upright with her back against the tall and wide glass wall of Terminal 2 at San Diego International Airport in California. The bright, white lights reflected off the glass, but could not illuminate the gloom that enveloped her. Her elegant, perfectly tailored suit and her discreet designer leather handbag lay at her feet. All her elegance and silent power seemed meaningless under the rough hands of the two young men. Police officers standing in front of her, Officer Ryan Mitchell, the older and clear leader, stood with his arms crossed, his thin lips curled in, a sneer of mockery and disdain. His blonde hair was cut short, and his cold blue eyes examined Isabella from head to toe, deliberately stopping at her expensive clothes and luggage. Next to him, Officer Ben Thompson, younger and inexperienced, tried to look tough, but his eyes were filled with concern and insecurity, only knowing how to stay on the sidelines and support his colleagues. Let's see, said Mitchell, his tone condescending and prejudiced, sufficiently loud for some passing passengers to look on with curiosity before quickly moving away. Designer clothes, that crocodile handbag. Must have made a lot. Of money, ma'am. He emphasized the word ma'am with undisguised sarcasm. I know your type. You look unusually successful. Are you smuggling something here, or is it contraband? He looked at the handbag at Isabella's feet, as if it contained incriminating evidence. Thompson quickly echoed, although his voice was a bit shaky. Right. Ryan looks suspicious. Why would someone like her have so many expensive things? Isabella Hernández remained perfectly silent, showing neither fear nor panic. Instead, her dark, penetrating eyes calmly scanned her surroundings with the intense focus of the experienced investigator captured every detail. Mattel's flushed face, the number Milk 38 on his identification badge, Thompson's agitation, number 1205, their precise locations in the vast terminal, the orientation of the security cameras mounted on the ceiling, the indifferent or curious reactions of the other passengers, then their hasty departures, a sad and complicit silence. The loudspeaker announcements of arrivals and departures resonated throughout the terminal, blending with the clatter of suitcase wheels on the polished floors. The distinctive smell of aviation fuel floated in the air amidst the hustle and bustle of one of the largest international airports in the world. The contrast between the elegant appearance and strangely calm of the handcuffed woman and the rude, aggressive and prejudiced attitudes of the two young police officers became even more pronounced and painful. Mitchell seemed uncomfortable with the silence and calm of Isabella. He moved closer, lowering his voice in a falsely friendly manner, but his words were laden with naked threat. Listen, ma'am, he said, his cigarette-smelling breath blowing in Isabella's face. We can take you right now to the airport police station. Check everything you have. Do a background check. You know the paperwork here is complicated. You could have to stay here for a few days, miss all your business. He paused deliberately, staring intently into Isabella's unwavering eyes. Oh, continued Mitchell, his tone becoming shamelessly conditional. It could make things much easier. Make it more pleasant for both parties. Isabella remained silent, but her eyes turned cold. She knew exactly what was coming. Just a little goodwill on her part, continued Mitchell, licking his dry lips, revealing his greedy nature. Give us a small compensation to end this. Consider it a no-trouble fee. He looked around as if fearing someone might overhear, even though his voice was still loud enough for Isabella to hear. How about 1,000 in cash? It's not much for someone as elegant as you, right? He gestured towards the small wallet in Isabella's purse. Just give us the money, and we'll pretend nothing happened. We'll forget all the suspicions. We'll take off the handcuffs immediately, and you can go wherever you want. No one will know. No one will notice. Quick and easy, right? Mattel's face was full of smugness. He was sure he had the upper hand, that this rich, lonely Latina woman would get scared and obediently hand over the money to avoid trouble. Ben Thompson was by his side, his face still tense but also expectant, miles divided between them. Nash, a pretty good sum for two. Low-ranking police officers, racist behavior, abuse of power, illegal handcuffs had now escalated to a much more serious crime. Attempted extortion, demanding bribes directly at the international airport. Two young officers, blinded by greed and prejudice, had no idea they had just dug a deep hole that would bury their own futures. Minutes earlier, Isabella Hernández had passed through immigration and picked up her small suitcase from the baggage carousel. She had just finished a long flight from Geneva, Switzerland, to attend an important international conference on cybersecurity and global counterterrorism. As the director of one of the world's leading intelligence and law enforcement agencies, her presence at the conference was highly confidential. On her return trip, she had decided to fly commercial as a regular passenger, accompanied only by a few assistants and security agents who maintained a discreet distance, as she had instructed. Isabella wanted the opportunity to observe security, procedures and operations in a main airport like San Diego, without the usual preparations for high-ranking officials to travel, was elegantly dressed in a suit by a famous designer, but in a classic style, not very flashy. Her handbag and suitcase were also designer, but discreet, without obvious logos. She wanted to blend in with the crowd, not attract special attention, but perhaps it was the unusually successful appearance of a middle-aged Latina woman traveling alone that caught the attention of Officer Ryan Mitchell. As Isabella walked towards the taxi stand outside the terminal, she was stopped by Mitchell and Thompson. "Excuse me, ma'am, we need to check your identification," said Mitchell, his tone initially. Professional Isabella stopped calmly. "Is there an official problem?" "Random security check," Mitchell responded brusquely, his eyes scrutinizing her clothes and luggage. "Please show me your identification." Isabella took her driver's license out of her bag, a valid form of identification that did not reveal her true status. Mitchell took it, examined it unnecessarily, and began asking questions that went beyond the scope of a routine check. "Where are you from? What is the purpose of your trip? Why are you traveling alone? What is in this luggage? What do you do? What makes you look so rich?" His tone became increasingly insolent and prejudiced. Isabella patiently answered the questions briefly and appropriately, but began to feel increasingly uncomfortable with the clearly racist attitudes and questions. "Officer," she said, her voice still calm but now a bit stern, "I don't understand why you are asking me these questions. I have presented my appropriate documents. If there is no other valid reason, please let me go." "A valid reason?" Mitchell scoffed. "We suspect you may be transporting illegal goods. We need to search your luggage." "On what basis do you suspect?" Isabella asked, looking him directly in the eyes. "Do you have a search warrant or at least a specific probable cause?" Isabella's direct and legalistic questions seemed to have enraged Mitchell. He took it as resistance, and a challenge to his authority is enough, he shouted. "Her behavior is suspicious. Thompson, handcuff her. We're taking her to the station for questioning." Ben Thompson looked hesitant, but under Mitchell's gaze he said, "You have no right to do that," protested Isabella, her voice now sharp. "This is abuse of power and false imprisonment." "Shut up," Mitt yelled. "What do you think about the rules and regulations? Where did you get the money to dress so elegantly? It must be illegal." He turned to Thompson. "Handcuffs." And so the cold handcuffs tightened around Isabella Hernández's wrists. Throughout the process of being arrested, roughly interrogated, searched without cause, and finally illegally handcuffed, Isabella Hernández showed no signs of fear or weakness. Her brain, trained by decades of dealing with the most dangerous and complex situations, was working at full capacity. She was not just a victim, she was also a master investigator, silently, gathering evidence. When Michel made his blackmail offer of $10,000, Isabella was not surprised. She had expected it from his previous attitude and insinuations. She remained silent, looking directly into Mitchell's eyes, not out of foolish defiance, but to give him more time to dig himself deeper into the hole. Her silence only made him more arrogant, more talkative, more evidence against himself. What? Don't you have money, or don't you want to cooperate? Mitchell lost patience with Isabella's unsettling silence. Fine. Then go to the station. You will have to tell everything there. She turned to signal to Thompson to get ready to escort her, probably to the airport police station or some more discreet place to continue the pressure. That was the last straw. Isabella Hernández knew it was time to act. She had irrefutable evidence of a series of crimes: racial profiling, abuse of power, false arrest, and handcuffing, culminating in a blatant extortion plot. It was time for these two young police officers to face the real consequences of their actions. It was time for them to learn how fatally wrong they had been, just as Ben Thompson's hand touched Isabella's arm to push her towards in front of her. Her voice was surprisingly calm, but there was an underlying current of authority that made both policemen shudder. "I need to make a phone call," said Isabella clearly. Word by word, Ryan Mitchell smiled mockingly, his arrogance not completely gone. "Call now." "Who are you calling? Your lawyer or your boss to pay the ransom?" He continued his taunts, unaware that the situation was about to change completely. Isabella ignored his words and repeated her request, her tone not admitting refusal. "I need to call my deputy director." Mitchell and Thompson exchanged confused frowns. "Deputy director of what?" Mitchell asked again, his voice still condescending but now a bit curious. "What company do you work for that has a deputy director?" He still thought she was some kind of businesswoman, probably doing illegal business. "Give me my cell phone, please," Isabella demanded firmly. "It's in the zippered compartment of my bag." Thompson hesitated, looking to Mitchell for instructions. Mitchell, perhaps thinking it wouldn't hurt to let her make the call, maybe even bring money, shrugged and gestured for Thompson to do it. Thompson bent down, opened her designer leather bag, and took out a black smartphone. To Zabache, it didn't seem like much on the surface, but it was actually a government-issued communications device with the highest level of encryption. Thompson handed it to her. He handed the phone to Isabella. Although her hands were still handcuffed, she managed to skillfully touch the screen. She must have used voice recognition or a special gesture code. The screen lit up, and an almost instant call was made to a top-priority number. Ben Thompson, following Isabella's signal, held the phone to his ear. The other end of the line answered immediately with a deep, professional male voice. "Marcus, it's me. Isabella," Isabella said into the phone, her voice now completely different. No longer that of a passenger, but of a supreme commander. "I'm at San Diego Airport, Terminal 2, near Exit 7. She paused for a second, looking at the two officers who listened in confusion. "There has been a serious security incident involving two local police officers here. Names: Officer Ryan Mitchell, badge number 1138, and Officer Ben Thompson. License plate number 125. They have handcuffed me without my permission and have just committed an act of attempted extortion." Her voice became colder and sharper. "I need the rapid response team from the San Diego FBI office at my location immediately. Notify the special people in charge, Maria Rodriguez. Priority level 1. Repeat priority level 1. Mitchell and Thompson heard every word. Marcus Isabella San Diego. FBI Office Lead Agent Maria Rodriguez. Priority level 1. The names and terms were like alarms, ringing in their heads, especially the words FBI. Their faces began to change rapidly from bewilderment to total confusion. Who was this woman? Why was she calling the FBI? How did she know the name of Lead Agent Rodriguez, and what did priority level 1 mean? A sense of unease, a vague fear began to filter into their minds. Isabella ended the call with a brief understood Marcus, stay on hold for further instructions. He gestured to Thompson to hang up the phone. then turned to look directly into the eyes of Ryan Mitchell, whose arrogant gaze had vanished completely, replaced by growing confusion and fear. "You," said Isabella, her voice as cold as ice, each word like a knife cutting through the officer's rising panic. "You have just made a very, very serious mistake." She paused for a moment, letting the weight of the warning sink in. "You have just illegally handcuffed, insulted, and attempted to blackmail the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The last words, "director of the FBI," resonated like thunder on a clear day. Mitchell and Thompson stood frozen in place, completely motionless, their mouths agape in shock and horror, their eyes wide open, staring at Isabella as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing all. The color drained from their faces in an instant, leaving only the sickly pallor of absolute fear. They looked at the woman in front of them, the expensive suit that couldn't hide her authority, the terrifying calmness of her demeanor from start to finish, and now, the incredible but unquestionable statement, "Director of the FBI." This woman is the director of the FBI, Isabella Hernández, the head of the most powerful federal law enforcement agency in the United States. Impossible. It must be a joke, a mistake. But the tone of her voice when she called the names she mentioned, and especially her extraordinary calmness from the beginning until now, showed that it couldn't be false. Ryan Mitchell trembled all over, his voice stammering. No, you must be joking, right, ma'am? Please tell me you're joking." He almost wanted to run forward and take the handcuffs off Isabella, but his feet were frozen to the floor, unable to move from fear. Ben Thompson stood there like a statue, his face pale, his whole body trembling. He looked at Isabella, then at Mitchell, his mind filled with a vast void of horror. He realized he had just participated in something terrible. He had helped his partner handcuff and attempt to blackmail the FBI director. The consequences of this action were unimaginable. The fatal mistake was exposed, and the fate of the two young police officers was sealed the moment they decided to detain the elegant Latina woman. Less than 10 minutes after that fateful call, a surprisingly short time given the efficiency and absolute priority of the call, a small commotion began to form at the end of the hallway. A group of approximately 5 or 6 men and women dressed in civilian clothes but exuding professionalism, determination, and authority. Invisible moved quickly and organized towards Isabella Hernández, and the two petrified police officers moved. As a single unit, their sharp gazes examining the growing crowd of onlookers who automatically parted to make way. Leading the group was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and a fitted dark suit. She was the special agent in charge, Maria Rodriguez, the head of the San Diego FBI office. Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson had probably seen her photo or heard her name during interagency security briefings at the airport. The presence of such a high-ranking figure confirmed their worst fears. Rodriguez walked directly towards Isabella Hernández, her face showing a mix of concern and barely contained anger at seeing her superior still handcuffed. "Director Hernández?" she exclaimed, her voice full of respect and concern. "Are you okay? What happened?" The other FBI agents quickly dispersed, forming a discreet but effective perimeter around the area, their cold and piercing gazes fixed on Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson, assessing the situation and ready to act. Under orders, the atmosphere around her became extremely tense. The real power was present. Isabella Hernández, still handcuffed, had regained her commanding demeanor and calmly responded to AEC Rodriguez. "I'm fine, Maria, no injuries, but these two officers are in serious trouble." She nodded towards Mitchell and Thompson, who were now pale and trembling like leaves, unable to look up at the FBI agents. Following the director's gaze, she turned to look at the two policemen with fiery eyes. She didn't need to ask more questions. Firmly, her voice full of authority, she ordered her agents, "Disarm these two officers immediately, their badges and radios, detain them for processing." Two large and well-trained FBI agents immediately approached Mitchell and Thompson. The two officers made no attempt to resist. They were too shocked, too scared, and completely paralyzed by the overwhelming federal presence. The sidearms, additional handcuffs, radios, and police badges they wore with such pride were quickly and professionally removed by the FBI agents. Another agent approached Isabella Hernández. "Excuse me, Director," he said, and carefully used a special key to release the handcuffs that bound her hands. The soft click of the cuffs was the end of Mitchell Thompson's brief freedom and the end of their careers. Once released, Isabella gently rubbed her slightly reddened wrist, then turned to Rodriguez and began to give clear and coherent instructions demonstrating the experience and absolute authority of the head of the FBI. "Maria, seal this area immediately. No one except our personnel and authorized personnel will be allowed to enter or exit." She ordered, "Collect all the data from the security cameras within the range of the incident, from the moment I was detained until now, for the technical department to analyze immediately, confiscate the radios and any personal recording devices that these two officers may be carrying, particularly check if they are using cameras. Corporal, if so, that would be extremely important. Evidence, identify and record any passenger or airport staff who witnessed the incident. Your team will take their statements later. Contact the Office of the Assistant United States Attorney for the Southern District of California. Immediately notify them of the incident and request that a prosecutor be sent to the scene." Rodriguez and the FBI agents obeyed and quickly deployed their assigned tasks. Sergeant Al Garcia, the airport police supervisor for the Mitchell and Thompson unit, had also been notified and rushed to the scene. His face paled at the sight of the chaos. The FBI director was present, directing the federal agents while two of his subordinates were unarmed and restrained. Sergeant Garcia stammered, trying to apologize to Isabella Hernández and AEC Rodriguez, but was clearly in complete shock and unsure of what to do. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson, fully aware of the inevitable terrible consequences that awaited them, loss of job, criminal prosecution, prison time, began their desperate plea. "Director Hernández, please forgive us," Mitrima shouted with tears and snot running down his face, completely losing his image as a police officer. "Idiots. We were wrong. We didn't really know. We didn't know it was you. Please give us a chance to make things right. We are young and inexperienced with a whole future ahead of us. Please don't ruin our lives." Ben Thompson also sobbed. "Yes, Director, please have mercy. We are just following a bad habit. We promise we will never do it again. Please." Isabella Hernández turned to look at the two men crying and pleading. Their eyes were cold with no trace of pity or hesitation. "You are not wrong for not recognizing who I am," she said, her voice calm but powerful, cutting through their pleas. "You are wrong for abusing your position and authority. You are wrong for acting on racial prejudice. You are wrong for illegally handcuffing an innocent citizen, and you are guilty of a serious crime for intentionally attempting to extort money from the person you were supposed to protect." She paused, letting her words sink into the panicked minds of Mitchell and Thompson. "This late remorse cannot erase those. Actions now remain silent. Cooperate with my agents and wait for the legal process to take its course." The words of the FI director were a premature verdict. Mitchell and Thompson knew that any plea would be futile. The tide had turned, the wheels of federal justice were in motion, and they were firmly on their tracks once the situation at the scene was fully under control. By FBI agents, the case of officers Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson was quickly transferred to full federal jurisdiction for investigation and prosecution. This decision was made not only because the victim was the FBI director, but also because the nature of the crimes, serious violations of civil rights under color of law and conspiracy to commit extortion, were both federal crimes under federal law. The Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of California immediately took over the case. This sensitive and high-profile case was assigned to David Chen, a young prosecutor with a reputation for being sharp, decisive, and with a track record of handling cases involving corruption and abuse of public power. Attorney Chen recognized the importance of the case not only for the victims, but also to strengthen public confidence in the integrity of the law enforcement system. He quickly worked closely with the team of FBI investigation led by AEC Maria Rodriguez to build an irrefutable case file. Meanwhile, the Port Authority Police Department launched its own internal investigation into Mitchell and Thompson. However, under the immense pressure of the scandal and the overwhelming initial evidence provided by the FBI, the internal investigation was rushed. Both Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson were immediately suspended, and their dismissals became official just days later. The police badges they had carried were permanently stripped from them. In addition to losing their jobs, Mitchell and Thompson faced a legal storm from the federal government based on preliminary evidence and testimony from Director Hernandez. A formal arrest warrant was issued by a federal court, and the two former police officers were arrested by FBI agents and taken into federal custody to await their first court date. The FBI investigation was thorough and professional. Left no stone unturned. The video analysis from the security cameras clearly captured the entire incident from multiple angles in Terminal 2 from the moment Mitchell approached Isabella Hernández. The tense conversation, the illegal handcuffing to the moment. They tried to extort money, although the audio was not audible. The actions and gestures were clear personal device checks. Fortunately, Thompson had turned on his body camera as required, but he might have forgotten to turn it off or didn't think. It would record his misconduct. The audio and video recordings from the body camera became the most powerful evidence, recording all the racist and derogatory words, and especially Mitchell's $1,000 offer was the irrefutable evidence in the case. Witness testimony. The FBI took a formal statement from Director Isabella Hernández. She presented the incident calmly, objectively, and accurately, without exaggeration or personal emotion, giving her testimony special weight. Maria Rodriguez and other FBI agents who were at the scene also testified about the director's condition when they arrived and the process of subduing and disarming the two suspects. Sergeant Al Garcia, Mitchell and Thompson's supervisor, was also called to provide information about the two former officers. Several passengers and airport employees who witnessed the incident were also located and interviewed, corroborating the victims' stories. Record verification. The FBI conducted a disciplinary check of Mitchell and Thompson's previous records. They found that Mitchell had several informal complaints about intimidation and discrimination in the past, but they were not serious enough to warrant serious disciplinary action. Thompson had a cleaner record, but was noted to be easily influenced by his peers. Thompson's testimony, faced with serious federal charges and irrefutable evidence, Corporal Ben Thompson, with the advice of his lawyer, decided to cooperate with the prosecution. He agreed to plead guilty to lesser charges and provide a complete and detailed account of the entire conspiracy and the actions of Ryan Mitchell. Admitting his complicity, Thompson's testimony further undermined Mitchell's position. After gathering sufficient evidence, FFA David Chen formally presented the charges to a federal grand jury. The grand jury, after reviewing the evidence, voted to indict Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson on serious federal charges. 1. Violation of civil rights under color of law. This crime targets the abuse of power by a law enforcement officer to intentionally deprive a citizen of their legal rights, in this case freedom and equal treatment. 2. Conspiracy to commit Hobbs Act extortion. This offense criminalizes conspiring or committing an act of extortion that interferes with interstate commerce activities in international airports, which are considered to affect interstate commerce. Mitchell's defense attorney, who now faced a much more difficult situation because Thompson had cooperated, attempted to negotiate a plea deal to avoid trial. However, FFA David Chen, with the support of the Department of Justice and aware of the serious symbolic nature of the case, rejected any disproportionate leniency. He was determined to bring both men to trial before a jury so that justice could be served openly and transparently, and to send a strong deterrent message to all who might considering abuse of power and corruption in law enforcement. The path to justice had been opened. Mitchell and Thompson now had to prepare to face a federal trial where their fate would be decided. The trial of former police officers Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson took place a few months later in the United States District Court for the Southern District of California, located in San Diego. The case attracted intense media and public attention, not only because the victim was the FBI director, but also because it touched on the thorny issues of racism, abuse of power, and corruption in law enforcement. The courtroom was filled with reporters, members of the public, and activists. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney David Chen, had prepared an extremely strong case, presenting the evidence systematically and logically to the 12-member jury. The body camera footage, airport security footage, clearly showed the two defendants detaining, searching, and handcuffing Isabella Hernández. The most important part was the audio and video from Ben Thompson's body camera. When the tape was played, the entire courtroom fell silent, listening to Ryan Mitchell's racial slurs and especially his brazen offer of melosis. This was irrefutable evidence directly attacking the defendant's defense. The star witness, FBI Director Isabella Hernández, took the stand, appearing in formal business attire with calm and professional behavior. She recounted the entire incident clearly, coherently, and accurately, down to every detail, without showing agitation or personal emotion. She simply presented the facts as a citizen whose rights had been violated and as a witness to the case. Her calm, integrity, and authority made a strong and almost absolute impression on the jury. Her testimony could not be shaken by the defense attorney's questions. The FBI agents who were at the scene that day also testified, confirming Director Hernandez's condition when they arrived and her behavior. Mitchell Thompson's panic in the process of gathering evidence, Ben Thompson's testimony as part of his plea agreement was also presented in court, admitting all his misconduct and that of his team, especially Mitchell's role in orchestrating the extortion scheme. The defense faced an almost impossible task. Ryan Mitchell's lawyer did his best to minimize his client's guilt, arguing that Mitchell acted out of misunderstanding under pressure in a stressful environment like an airport, and that the money offer was a spur-of-the-moment decision, a silly joke rather than a deliberate attempt at extortion. He also tried to question Thompson's motives for cooperating with the prosecution, suggesting that Thompson was trying to blame Mitchell to save himself. Regarding the civil rights charges, the defense denied any racial bias, arguing that they were just words said in the heat of the moment. However, all these arguments fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence, especially the camera recording. Corporal Ben Thompson's lawyer focused on his client's inexperience and the fact that he acted under orders and pressure from his senior teammate. He emphasized Thompson's cooperation and remorse as factors in his request for a reduced sentence. After both sides' closing arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. Their deliberations did not take long. After only a few hours, they returned to the courtroom with a unanimous verdict. The jury foreman stood up and read the verdict aloud. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Ryan Mitchell, guilty of violating civil rights under color of law and guilty of conspiracy to extort money under the Hobbs Act. We also find the defendant, Ben Thompson, guilty of violating civil rights under color of law and guilty of conspiracy to extort money under the Hobbs Act." Ryan Mitchell paled and collapsed onto the table upon hearing the verdict. Ben Thompson closed his eyes. Accepting their fate, justice had been decided. The sentencing hearing took place a few weeks later. U.S. Attorney David Chen once again emphasized the seriousness of the case, the betrayal of public trust by those who were supposed to protect, the reprehensible racial discrimination, and especially the brazen extortion scheme. He requested a severe prison sentence for both defendants to ensure deterrence. The defense attorneys made final pleas, citing their clients' remorse, the burden on their families, and their capacity for reform. Director Isabella Hernández was also present at the sentencing hearing and gave a victim impact statement. She focused not on individual pain, but on the negative impact that actions like those of Mitchell and Thompson have on the entire law enforcement system. "When those who wear the badge abuse their power out of prejudice or greed," she said in her calm but powerful voice, "they not only harm an individual, but erode the fragile and hard-won foundation of trust between the police and the community." The sentence today must send a clear message that integrity, justice, and respect for the law are not optional, negotiable for anyone who serves in law enforcement. Finally, the federal judge presiding over the trial delivered her verdict. She looked directly at the two defendants standing before her, Mitchell and Ben Thompson. She began in a stern voice. "You were entrusted with a sacred duty to uphold justice and serve the people. Instead, you chose to abuse your power, act on racial prejudice, and attempt to enrich yourselves by extorting money from a fellow citizen. Your actions are a disgrace to the badge you once wore and a stain on all honest law enforcement." She emphasized the abomination of extortion, especially when racially motivated. "Your actions are not just a singular crime, but an attack on the very foundations of the rule of law society in which we live. They demand severe and appropriate punishment." Therefore, the judge declared in court, "I sentence the defendant Mitchell to 12 years in federal prison. The court sentences the defendant Ben Thompson, considering his cooperation, but not his active complicity, to 8 years in federal prison." This was a harsh sentence reflecting the seriousness of the crimes they had committed. Mitchell and Thompson were handcuffed and taken out of the courtroom by federal marshals, beginning their sentences bringing a bitter end to their brief and scandalous careers in law enforcement. The sentencing of Mitchell and Ben Thompson sent shockwaves through the public and especially the law enforcement community nationwide. The case became a severe reminder of the terrible consequences of abuse of power, racism, and corruption, asserting that no one, no matter what badge they carry, is above the law, especially when faced with the full force of the federal judicial system. The Port Authority Police Department has undergone extensive internal reviews, introducing a series of reforms, including increased oversight, changes to hiring procedures, and retraining the entire force in ethics, anti-discrimination, bias identification, and the appropriate use of force. The incident also promoted the adoption and more serious use of body cameras in other police departments. The reputation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Director Isabella Hernández, personally, was further enhanced by the case, with her calm and professional handling of the situation in the face of abuse of power, along with the agency's quick and effective response and determination to pursue justice to the end, earning strong public recognition. The case underscored the power and the need for a federal law enforcement agency with the authority and resources to investigate and prosecute serious misconduct, even when it involves local law enforcement officers back at work at the FBI J. Edgar Hoover headquarters in Washington says Director Isabella Hernández sits in her large office looking out the large windows towards the Capitol and the Washington Monument, having just finished a tense meeting on a new anti-terrorism strategy did not feel joy or delight at the fall and sentencing of the two young former police officers, only felt relief and satisfaction that justice had been served fairly and strictly. The San Diego incident was a painful but necessary personal reminder of the persistent challenges facing America and law enforcement, the underlying racism, the potential for abuse of power, and the temptation to corruption. He knows that the struggle to build a law enforcement agency that is truly honest, just, respectful of human rights, and serves all people regardless of race or background continues. The persistent challenges facing America and law enforcement include underlying racism, the potential for abuse of power, and the temptation to corruption. He knows that the struggle to build a law enforcement agency that is truly honest, just, and respectful of human rights and serves all people regardless of race or background is long and arduous, but he is not discouraged. The incident has only strengthened his resolve to lead the FBI with integrity, justice, and an unwavering commitment to the rule of law. He will continue working to ensure that those in positions of power are always aware of the great responsibility that comes with it and be completely accountable for their actions. Isabella Hernández took a deep breath and returned to her desk where piles of files and reports awaited her. She picked up the phone, made another call, and continued her mission to protect national security and deliver justice to the country. The real satisfaction did not come from punishing the bad guys, but from believing that the system, as imperfect as it was capable of self-correction and protecting its core values, human dignity and legitimate power. They had finally prevailed in the unequal confrontation at the airport that day, and that was what mattered most. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss the next significant stories, because tomorrow we will have another significant story for you. Yes.